Hi everyone, my name is Lucy Jane Bledsoe, and I sure wish we were all hanging out together in New Orleans right now, since we're not. However, I'm very pleased to be a part of the reading series this year, and I would like to read 5 minutes from a short story out of my new collection, Lava Falls, that just came out in paperback. This is a story called The End of Jesus. And I've been obsessed lately with the hypocrisy of the Christian right and what they do to our queer community. So this story is about that. It's called The End of Jesus. It's about a girl named Robin. Actually, she's a woman now, and she's looking back on her childhood. So I'm going to read about 5 minutes. I'm going to read a little bit right from the beginning of the book, or story. And then I will read a little bit from further on in the story. The End of Jesus. Mac had been gone for more than 30 years. So when I found her little book in Powell's, I collapsed in shock, dropped right down there onto the bookstore's wood plank floor in a dusty splotch of sunlight coming from a high window. In my trembling hands, I held the book that had failed to save Mac's life, though it had saved my life. I'd come back to Oregon for my mother's memorial service, which would be taking place in under an hour, and I'd walked to the bookstore in a kind of trance that was a combination of grief and dread. The city of books was a comfort, all those words, all that knowledge, the vast diversity of human experience. I strolled through the store's many rooms as an antidote to the service I was about to attend, where everyone would believe in one and only one truth. I considered staying in the bookstore, skipping my mother's memorial service, and that blasphemous thought made me touch the books for grounding, for random guidance, and I dragged my hands along a few rows of bumpy spines. And there it was. I would have known it anywhere. The unassuming slim girth, the short red spine with the white lettering, Mac's book. It wasn't just the same title, it was the very book, her copy. I knew this because when I opened it up and flipped through, I found a section of blank pages in the back. On the first of these pages was the printed word notes. Here, the book owner was supposed to write down her own observations, and Mac had, with brief discretion. She had written, June 10th, Sylvia. June 14th, Sylvia, Sylvia. June 30th, Sylvia, Sylvia, Sylvia. August 9, Robin's Rocks. August 18, Hell. September 9, How to Survive. October 12, The End of Jesus. That August 9 entry, that's me, Robin. I'd lived under an entire rock pile of guilt ever since, but apparently it hadn't been misplaced. I was one of 3 people Mac named in the season of her demise: Sylvia, me, and Jesus. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. So that's her as an adult going back to her mother's memorial service, finding this book that had belonged to this 15-year-old girl in her church, and she had been obsessed with this 15-year-old girl named Mac. So here's just one paragraph describing a little bit about who Mac was. Mac was 15 years old, and my protagonist is 12 in this story. Mac was 15 years old, and unlike all the other teen girls at New Day Church, lanky and awkward, she wore boyish clothes and her long brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. I thought she got away with dressing like that because she was so smart. Mac knew the Bible inside and out. She could quote verses by heart, yet she refused to flaunt it. This frustrated Pastor Evans, how if he called out the chapter and verse, she'd deliver the words, but if he asked her to supply a passage that illustrated some point, she'd shake her head. She wasn't willing to twist the meanings of the Bible stories to flesh out anybody's agenda. Sometimes, though, she'd spontaneously recite a verse, simply setting the words verbatim alongside life. She always carried a small Bible right in her back pocket, the word against the body. Okay, jumping ahead a little bit again to the last bit I'm going to read. So Robin, my protagonist, becomes friends with Mac a little bit. Mac's much older, but took her out to this place to show her the dump and where this bear sometimes comes out to the dump. So Robin goes out there and keeps hoping to see Mac there. And on this day, she does find Mac there. On a hot midsummer day, I was stunned to find Mac sitting on the hill above the dump with someone else. I stayed in the woods where I could watch, and this time she was too busy with that other person to notice me. This would be August 9. Mac described that day's events with 2 words: Robin's Rocks. Mac's companion was a pretty girl, her own age, with brown skin and wavy black hair. Her close-fitting cool lime tank top showed a lot of her breasts, and tight jeans sheathed her full hips. Her feet were bare and her toenails painted a dark color, maybe blue. The two girls laughed and pulled at tufts of grass. Mac laid her arms across her drawn-up knees and hid her face in them. Then she peeked at the girl out the side of her self-made mask. The girl pulled one of Mac's hands away from her face and held it in her own lap. She tickled Mac's palm with her fingers, as if writing words there. Mac's expression became very serious. The girl leaned in so that their faces were about 2 inches apart. Mac kissed her right on the mouth. That was okay. Jesus is love, right? This looked like love. But the kiss didn't end. It just kept going. They looked like they were mashing each other's faces. The girl leaned back and pulled Mac down with her, and they scooched their entire bodies against each other. That white light I had felt with Mac, the glow I thought was Jesus, it popped and hissed like firecrackers now. It burnt and scorched, turned to hot, dry coals. I bent down and found a rock. It was the size of a golf ball with sharp edges, and I fired it at the two girls. It landed near their feet, but they didn't even notice. I felt so angry and helpless, I didn't think I could breathe. I picked up a bigger rock and fired it too. This one landed a few feet away from their heads, and now they sat up, startled, looking around. I began pelting them with stones, throwing as hard and fast as I could. Mac leapt to her feet and picked up a rock herself. She threw it back at me and shouted, "Get out of here!" That's when I saw the bear. It lumbered toward the dump, but stopped when it saw the human crossfire. Mac and her friend were up on the hill, but I was still in the woods in the bear's territory, and this only increased my fear. I meant to shout the words, but they came out in a hoarse whisper. "I'm telling," I said. "I'm gonna tell." I ran all the way to the church, tripping on sticks, once falling so hard I scraped both forearms. I got right up, though, and ran so fiercely that by the time I got to the church parking lot, I was wet with tears and sweat. Pastor Evans always said that he was there for us, that we could come and talk anytime, and I went directly to his office. The door was locked. A dry mark board hung from a nail on the door, and a marker dangled from a string. Across the top of the board were the words, "I want to see you. Leave a note." I gripped the marker and wrote, "Robin was here." But I never told. I never told. I never told. Okay, I'm going to stop there. This is from my collection, Lava Falls, out in paper. Again, thank you so much for listening. And again, I sure wish we were all hanging out. Thank you to Saints and Sinners for including me in the reading series. And spring is here. There's compassion and sanity in the White House. And the vaccinations are here. So I hope all of you enjoy increasing wonderfulness. Thanks. Goodbye.
I'm Perry Brass in the Bronx, New York. I'll be reading from A Real Life, my memoir, about how in 1965 I hitchhiked from Savannah, Georgia to California, where I could be more openly gay. On the streets of LA, I met Blake, an older man who became my mentor and fellow hustler. Things were fine for a while. That is, until one day in Pershing Square, I met Rodney. Yes, Rodney. He was my age, exactly 17, and the most beautiful boy I'd ever seen in my life. He was of normal height, but perfectly formed, as if someone had taken a pair of sculptor's calipers and created this creature from the most ideal proportions ever assembled, with rower's wide shoulders, his silken, creamy, honey-skinned chest, capped with exquisite rose-petal soft nipples, and perfect arms, legs, and face. He had a nose and brow you'd see on a statue of a boyish Greek hero, with greenish blue eyes that truly melted time in an expression disarmingly innocent, yet capable of such defensive cruelty that it could, with perfectly aimed efficiency, destroy you. He was from Nashville, Tennessee, and had been hustling since he was 14. He came from a respectable, lower middle-class family, not one thrown into dire poverty as I'd been, and had started in local parks, where he met older men, often married ones, who would meet him and either pay him or buy him anything he wanted and then take him back to a hotel. He kept small kid jobs like babysitting so that his parents would not ask how he ended up with so much money for clothes or records or to spend on things that he wanted that they couldn't give him. He had a deep, inviting, soft Southern drawl. I tell him from the start, honey, I don't do nothing but lay back and let you do all the work, and don't you even think about fucking me. He had his shirt off in Pershing Square. It was like a bolt of lightning had hit me in the most delicious, almost mythically exquisite way, as if some teen idol Apollo had just fallen out of the sky. Like Blake, his hair was also dyed a kind of silver platinum color that, strangely enough, looked perfect on him. It made him look even more like an antique statue come to life. A moment later, the two of us were talking. I don't remember the first words we said. All I wanted to do was just look at him and kiss him. Another moment later, Blake took me aside, shaking his head. Perry, this is going to be a disaster. But when you're 17 and in love, there's no way around it. Rodney had been hustling in Hollywood. He knew exactly what to do and where to park himself on the street. He invited us to come with him that night. The three of us took a bus out and soon stepped out onto Hollywood Boulevard, all bright lights and tourists and wide sidewalk spaces with a park next to us. Look at this place, Rodney drawled. John's all over here, just waiting for us. He was right. One immediately stopped for Blake, who was wearing a pair of jeans so tight they provided a National Geographic map to his considerable endowment. This left me alone with Rodney. He suggested we go into the park. It was well lit and still buzzing with tourists. Shortly afterwards, we saw a thick hedge of green bushes and next to a wall. Why don't we go in there? He asked. We did, and within its depths, safely hidden from the outside clamor of tourist noise with bits of moonlight glinting in his platinum blonde hair, he kissed me. I thought my heart would stop. His lips were luscious, soft, and moist. I didn't want to stop kissing him. I peeled off his t-shirt and mine too, kissing his beautiful chest and shoulders. I felt like I was already sailing off into the sky. We got to stop here and make some money, he said half an hour later. Back on the boulevard, someone almost instantly, like 5 minutes later, picked him up. The three of us had arranged that the next day we'd meet back in Pershing Square. I didn't have to wait very long when another car stopped for me. In it was a polite, short, middle-aged man looking about as nondescript as possible, like some kind of suburban housewife's overworked husband out for a drive. I hopped in. He asked how I was doing that evening. I told him fine. He asked where I was going. I hesitated. I wasn't sure what to say. Suddenly in the rearview mirror, I saw his eyes narrow a bit, like he was thinking what to do next. Johns did that sometimes. The important thing with them was to stay in control, and maybe he wasn't. Suppose, he asked slowly, suppose I told you I was with the LA Vice Squad. I panicked. I thought about jumping out the car, but it was moving too fast. I started to sweat, then quickly drew a breath. Sure, this was no worse than being chased by those dumb shit boys back in the valley. Okay, I said calmly and shrugged. Then I'll ask you for every bit of ID you've got on you. I figured maybe wrongly that he'd have to stop to get his ID, and I'd just jump out. He looked at me and suddenly smiled this funny, sheepish grin, like he'd been put back in his place now, safely. Just joking, he said. I didn't mean to scare you. You seem like a nice kid. I like the way you talk. You're from the South, I can see. I wasn't happy with this. He put his hand on mine and I removed it. He could tell he'd pissed me off. He tried to make it up to me and took me out to eat. I was as ever hungry. I didn't know what his next move was, but I was broke and had to do what he wanted. I was very polite. You could say southernly, eating my hamburger and the French fries he bought me. We returned to his car, and he didn't even look at me, but just drove me back to Hollywood Boulevard and handed me $10. Thank you. I hope you enjoy Saints and Sinners 2021, and you'll come back for SNS 2022 in person.
Hello, I'm Christine Tedeschi, and I'm coming to you from New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm going to be reading from an excerpt from a creative nonfiction book that I've recently completed. It's titled The Man in the Chair on the Roof of the Sky, Waiting to Die. And it's subtitled LGBT Lives Under ISIS. In this chapter, I'm going to be speaking to Omar. I'm speaking to Omar, a gay Syrian asylum seeker that I met in Istanbul, who's a member of the Tea and Talk network. And I'm getting translation help from Ayman, a fellow asylee. And in this excerpt, Daesh is the name that is used to refer to ISIS. What happened when Daesh came? I asked him. How was it for you? Omar's body language says it all. He shrugs. When ISIS came, we didn't see a big difference. Not at first, he tells me. If you go into your house, you close the door. But in Al-Bukamal, he makes a face, shakes his head. There it was not good. Ayman interrupts, impatient to tell a story he knows about already. After the change to ISIS, he went to his family in Bukamal, Ayman tells me, as Omar nods. Yes, that's right. But Omar wants to tell his own story after all. He puts up his hand to stop Ayman, says something in Arabic. He's dropped his voice, conscious that we're in a restaurant, a public place, even though we're the only customers and in a faraway corner away from the waitstaff. Omar says, he went to his city. There, it's the first time. They will stone a woman. It's the first time he feels something more dangerous. Omar is talking about himself, that he is him in Bukamal when ISIS took over. His English is rough, but I understand. Ayman takes over. He's a witness. Omar agreeing, yes. Ayman, he doesn't know about before 2014. The first case he knew, it was one of his friends. Ayman is referring to the rooftop killings, to my search for Golden Sun, to cases of sky executions. I tell Omar, the first cases that I found were two young men, one in Mayadin, the other in Deir Zor, and later one in Bukamal in late 2014. I think about the two murdered men, a 20-year-old who I have called the Star of Mayadin for now, his placeholder name, and the 18-year-old killed in a different area later the same day or next in November 2014. The Mayadin case has been presented as the first official gay murder claimed by ISIS in some human rights reports. Ayman says, his friend was named Wissam. It's the same case. Who is Wissam? I ask Omar. Do you feel comfortable talking about this? Yes, we're from Syria, he says. We're used to hearing such stories. He looks at the others who are quiet now, respectful. All the initial banter at the dinner table is gone. His voice is so soft, I have to lean forward to hear. Although the tape recorder is capturing Omar's words, I write down bits that stand out. The name Wissam means Medal of Honor, Omar tells me. He was my close friend and a sex partner. I want to interrupt to know if by sex partner he means lover in a romantic sense, or just a more casual man jam, or hookup, or friends with benefits platonic relationship. Friends with benefit relationship. But I don't. Instead, I let him tell his story at his own pace. It was the summer of 2014, and Omar was working as a volunteer at the Red Crescent, the Islamic Red Cross. He had a car and was allowed to cross the city zones that were controlled by either ISIS or its ally, or the Assad regime and the Free Syrian Army, the FSA. He worked in both Deir Zor and Bukamal. The murder took place in Deir Zor, in an ISIS-controlled area. Now Omar is speaking in Arabic, so Ayman translates. Too many words go by again, making me feel like I'm missing the good stuff. But I wait, giving Ayman time. The two are discussing. Ayman is nodding actively. Okay, okay, he says in English before rattling something off in Arabic. Under ISIS, Ayman eventually reports, he feels very scared. If anyone he sees in the street, he dreams ISIS comes and kills him. The he is Omar, not Ayman, not Wissam. Ayman explains to me how Omar kept an extremely low profile. Omar mimes his behavior, putting his hands over his head like someone trying to avoid getting rained on. The others at the table nod in agreement. Omar's family, he and Ayman tell me in a tag team English-Arabic way, was living in a part of the city under ISIS control, but his brother was with the regime. I again want to interrupt, but I don't, to ask, was his brother pro-Assad or just stuck on that side, maybe supporting the FSA? I scribble my questions down instead for future follow-up. Omar tells me that Wissam was the only gay person in their student circle left in the area, apart from himself, in that period of ISIS's occupation. All the others had moved to Lebanon and Turkey already. Wissam was planning to travel to Damascus, and Omar had stayed behind to say goodbye to him. I advised him before Damascus, don't go, they'll catch you, Omar tells me. I hug him and I say, stay, don't go. We finish the exam and we go. Last time I saw him in the back of a foreign car and he's waving to me. Wissam went for a week to Damascus, was last seen in a gay club. When he left, he was headed back for Abu Kamal. Omar tried to call him, but Wissam's phone was off. He then sent him a WhatsApp message, but it was off too. He couldn't even find Wissam's account on WhatsApp anymore. He then tried to communicate with Wissam's family. For 2 days, they don't know anything, Omar tells me, referring to Wissam's family. The third day, they say Daesh catches him. He says something to Ayman in Arabic for some clarification. Ayman adds, he says Wissam was arrested by Daesh for 2 months from the eastern area of Syria. After 2 months, everyone knows he is LGBT. Between the arrests, it's 2 months, then they kill him. Another friend's mother told them when they killed Wissam. His friend's mother said she witnessed it. Omar's nodding, looking down at his hands now. He looks up at me, shrugs. This time the shrug means, what can I say? Isn't that fucked up? He's shaking his head, then grimaces. Was it a public execution? I ask him a moment later. Yes. His reply in English is quick and calm. I can see Omar's hands are trembling a little. He hadn't appeared nervous until then, but this memory is upsetting him, even if he's told his story to others like Ayman before. I'm so sorry, I say to him. It's so awful. He shrugs his head. He nods his head, then shrugs, trying to clear the rising emotion, his sorrow. Ayman is putting his arm around Omar's shoulder, and another boy to his left is patting his arm. Now Omar doesn't even try to hold back the tears. We take a break. Omar drinks his tea. After a while, he indicates he's ready to talk again. How did Wissam's family respond to this, I ask. His father, before they killed Wissam, when they go to kill him, he said, he's not my son. His mother, because the neighbors are talking, they had to leave and to go out of the city, Omar tells me. As he recounts this, the other men shake their heads, disgusted at the father. This is what they do, one of the others say. Discussion in Arabic takes place. Agreement, disagreement. I wish I could know everything they're saying. He was in danger, Ayman takes up the story, pointing to Omar now. Every day, he sees himself next, because Wissam had a photo of himself and Wissam naked. And every day he could see himself die. Omar is wiping his hands with his fingers, rubbing his tears into his skin. I knew that they would look for me, he says. I knew I had to leave right then. No goodbye, just go. I'm going to stop there. Thanks so much for inviting me to be part of the Saints and Sinners reading series. And congratulations to the festival organizers for this wonderful event. I hope I'll be able to read the rest of this story and the book to you one day. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Robert Guyron. I'm coming to you from Arlington, Virginia. I'm going to read 2 poems today. The first one is from Love Jets, Queer Male Poets on 200 Years of Walt Whitman. O Captain, my Captain, after Walt Whitman. With taut muscles I lay waiting as I longed to feel goosebumps rise and quiver like ferns drenched in morning dew. Wrestling with the rising sun, radiating heat, the passion we've known, once lost out of fear of rejection, folded into oblivion of nirvana. So here we lay beside each other, crisscrossed, a puzzle twisted, like willows bending over to shake morning dew off goose-bumped flesh. For here, in solace away from men of weapons and hate bred from fear, we embrace with muscles taut. Iron and steel have no match. The longing wanting to fold into comfort, comfort only one like the other can bestow. Grasping, radiating heat and passion, twisted, bent, then stiffened, like one's rifle meant for war. But here there is no war, merely passion and the sweat of men, glistening, thrusting, curves of muscle into the oblivion of nirvana. Next, I'd like to read a poem from the anthology, This Is What America Looks Like, Poetry and Fiction from D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. Coexisting to what America should look like. Close your eyes to avoid seeing the masses, lining up at the food banks, waiting, masked in the hot sun beaming on their slumped shoulders with caked tears on each side of their eyes. They look out at the fathers, mothers, families, wanting to be elsewhere. Think of two men sitting beside their dog, relaxed, looking out at the greenery. Lush hostas and daylilies, ready to burst, bright orange, and in the midst is the pointed foxglove with its deep pink plume shooting towards the sky. Seal your ears to the shouting, give us back our dignity, and I can't breathe. Pinch your nose so you don't get the whiff of burnt tires and the stench of pepper spray. Turn off the TV so you don't continue to count the bodies carried out in bags for lack of space. Change the radio station to avoid hearing our lost, forgotten allies lament the going to bad of the Make America Great Again. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Connor Nelson. I live in Miami, Florida. This is an excerpt from my short story, The Bikini Motel. I'm going to start a few pages in, so to give you some context, the story is told by 8-year-old Sadie, who is going to a local motel with her father while her mother is out of town for the night. Sadie's father rents 2 rooms, one for Sadie and one for himself. The scene starts when Sadie enters her room. There was a lamp on the nightstand, already on. There was a beautiful mermaid holding a lampshade over her head. The carpet had lots of dark spots. I put my backpack on the bed and climbed on. I lay on my back for a little while. The walls were blue. The ceiling was blue with dark curvy lines through it like the lines on the sea. There were big blue curtains, a comfy chair with a footrest and a TV that reflected the lamp almost perfectly, its gray screen like a little dark version of the room. There was something strange about this hotel, but I couldn't tell what. I rolled over and looked at the mermaid lamp, and that was when I realized maybe it was for mermaids. That would explain the water stains on the carpet. Maybe it was so dark here because mermaids had to live in private. Maybe people think they're weird when they know what they really are. Or worse, maybe people try to steal them for their tails. I heard a yell and sat up. It was a lady's yell, like she'd gotten hurt or scared. Then I heard her say, "Help," then a slap, quick, like the time mommy slapped the back of my legs after I ran into the street by myself. And I heard someone go, "Shh." It was a room next door. I ran to my door and stopped in front of it, looked up and saw that it had a peephole. I ran to the footrest, rolled it to the door and climbed onto it. I covered one eye and looked through the peephole with my other. I saw the back of a man in a cap and sunglasses at Daddy's door across the hall. Daddy opened up. I could hear him, muffled through my door, say, "Hey, did you hear that?" The other man shrugged. "Yeah, and some other things." Daddy looked down both ends of the hallway, then let the man into his room and stepped up to my door. "Sadie," he said, "are you all right in there?" "Yes, Daddy," I said. "Okay, honey. If you ladies are going out tonight, tell Barbie I like the pink dress." "Okay, Daddy." I continued watching through the peephole as Daddy stepped back across the hall to his room, smacking the man's booty as the door closed behind them. Behind the wall, beside me, I heard peeing in the toilet, like a man's. I stepped quietly onto the carpet. I heard a knock on the wall, over by the bed. Then another. I walked slowly to the bed, climbed on top and crawled across to the wall. I put my ear to it. A knock banged so loud I fell back onto the bed. The toilet flushed. I ran back to the door. Suddenly there was clapping and laughing, muffled but close. The TV in the room next door had been turned on. I moved the footrest and opened the heavy door, then stepped into the blue-lit hallway and towards Daddy's room. As I raised my hand to knock, the door beside my room opened and shut, and before I could look, a big man walked into me and knocked me to the ground. My keycard flew from the pocket of my dress. His clapped to the floor beside me. A bucket rolled at his feet. I looked up at the man, who was shadowy and outlined in the blue. He bent forward and reached out his hand. "Sorry," he said. I took his hand, it was sticky, and he lifted me to my feet. I looked at our key cards on the floor. You're a really pretty little girl," he said. I picked them up. I handed him a key card. "Thanks," he said, then picked up the bucket and walked down the hallway. I watched him turn the corner, then looked at his door. I stuck his key card in and pushed it open. The room was flashing with the light of the TV. The laughing got louder. I reached up and flipped a switch on the wall and a lamp turned on. I stepped around the corner of the bathroom and saw a girl trapped on the bed. She looked like a big girl, almost a lady, but her hair was crazy and covered her face. Her arms were spread and wrists were tied against the bedpost with black ropes so tight they were purple. Her fingers curled and knuckles pressed against the wall to my room. She was the one knocking and asking for help. Her legs were spread and her feet tied down too, and her skin was greenish. She was naked, and I knew, because mermaids were always naked when they lost their tails, that she was one. And that man had tied her to the bed so that he could take part of her body, that part that made her special but that she had to hide, her beautiful mermaid tail. It wasn't there now, of course. She was out of the water. But I bet if he chopped off her legs and dipped them into the ocean, they would turn into a tail in his arms. I walked over to the side of the bed. I wouldn't be able to untie the ropes. I couldn't even untie my own shoelaces. I opened the drawer to the nightstand. I needed something sharp like a knife or an axe. The lady turned her head to me. Her hair fell from her face and I saw it was big and bruised like a purple balloon. Her eyes opened. "Who are you?" she said. "I'm Sadie," I whispered. "I'm here to save you." And I'll stop there. Thank you so much, Saints and Sinners, for having me. Hope to buy you all a round of drinks next year.
Hello, this is Felice Picano. I'm in West Hollywood, California, just gloomy and rainy today, unexpectedly. And I'm going to be reading a couple of pages from my soon-to-be published novel, Pursuit of Victorian Entertainment. And this is what the cover looks like. I hope you can see that. That'll be out in May. Bold Strokes Press is publishing that. Handsome, intelligent, street smart, ruthlessly ambitious, and omnisexual, young Addison Grimmins has been hired by the Lord Exchequer of England to be his second and to do and be what Lord R cannot do himself. After a country estate wedding, the Marchioness of R is discovered missing. Is it a kidnapping or a more sinister plot? Addison vows to find out. It is 1880s England and Europe. And I'm going to be reading from a section inside, about 100 pages inside the book. He has gone past, he's gone past his prey, he's in pursuit. And she's stuck at the Brenner Pass in Switzerland, and he's waiting for her in Ancona, Italy, and he's staying in a pension there. And this is Signor Marcellini. One elderly, well put together man attended all the card games in the pensione. Nattily dressed and never to be without spotless spats on his polished to a glitter boots and an ivory tipped turned wood walking stick he leaned on while slowly walking. He left the stick prominent upon a chair by the doorway, along with his gray suede gloves and dove gray fedora. He was distinguished looking, with his cloud of cotton white hair and a Roman visage only spoiled by an extended purple lower lip. The Signor Marcellini sat and watched the games like a hawk while gulping down a local aperitif called limoncello. As Addison was leaving for an afternoon stroll, suddenly next to him outside the pension, there was the lawyer who placed a gray gloved hand upon his forearm in a surprisingly intimate gesture and asked in quite good English if Il Inglese had a few moments to look at what might be interesting. The lawyer lived above his small law chambers, and while the rooms were large and many windowed, Allison couldn't help but notice how underfurnished it was. The library was no better, with only a large old desk and a single chair, the walls bare of pictures, with their square, rectangular, and in one case oval outline still visible, suggesting a man whose financial star had waned and who was selling off one by one what his ancestors had accumulated. The first small recto volume that the lawyer drew out was in Latin and Greek, which Addison recognized but neither read nor spoke. Lucretius, the lawyer declared, very early, 1610. The second volume was larger and contained drawings in pen and ink representing several youths and young women dressed and undressed and engaged in various sensual activities. This looked far more modern, and Addison was about to ask if the lawyer was the artist when he couldn't help but notice the profile of a hawk-nosed youth with an unmistakably protruding lip, upon which rested a portion of another youth's male member. Several other drawings confirmed that the lawyer, although much younger, was well and quite actively represented. I am told, the lawyer Marcellini said, you are in the employ of a great lord. You are told correctly, Addison said. Art of this sort is, I believe, not so common in the England, Marcellini said. Never common enough, Addison agreed, especially when it is so variegated. You are certain you can part with this? Ah, yes, he glibly lied. Everyone who is model is dead. Then yes, I shall write to my lord about these 2 volumes. This larger one will interest him greatly. The lawyer then handed Addison a sheet of pre-printed stationery. I'll write to him by telegraph, if that suits you, Addison said. It is faster. He was about to step out of the room when a ray of sun caught a section of thinning number of books on one shelf. Always one for signs, Addison followed it and found a curious notebook. Inside, handwritten pages in very fine ink cursive of a correspondence between 2 friends in both Italian and English. One superscription was that of Umberto Achille Marcellini, the lawyer himself, dated 1823. The other, while not readily legible, was somehow familiar. Is this for sale? Addison asked. When the lawyer looked at it, he added, it seems to be the intimate letters of 2 young men. That Grecian kind of relationship interests both myself and my lord. Would you sell it to us at a very dear price? The lawyer looked startled at first and then resigned. Yes, he said, for a very dear price. Then I will certainly mention it in my telegram. I'll go do that now. Back at the pension, Addison flung open a little volume of British poets and found the illustration he was looking for, as well as the famous poet's familiar signature, which he had just seen on the letters. The full-length portrait was so cleverly done, the viewer could scarcely make out the poet's club foot. The same club foot being licked by several women in those ink drawings the lawyer had just shown him. The same club foot being thrust up to the tarsal knuckles into the anus of one of the young men. That would be a find. He wondered if he should even let his lordship look at the letters. Surely the drawings ought to be enough. Yes, Addison would keep the letters himself. They could prove profitable. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tammy Lynne Stoner, and I'm going to read an excerpt from my new book called The Cycle of Soil, which is not available yet. It's the follow-up to my debut, Sugarland. In this one, we're going to hear from Dick Clare, who was re-lifed after being cryogenically frozen in 1988, and that's the true part of the story. He was a writer for the Carol Burnett show, The Mama's Family, It's a Living. He was on Ed Sullivan. He was sort of this 80s pop kind of guy. Anyway, he's re-lifed in my book. Dick Clare is his name, and the year is 2071 after more than half of the world has gone to live on these islands called lily pads while the earth recovers. If you, like me, opted to be cryogenically frozen in 1988 to cheat death, here's what will happen to you when you wake up from the freezer and find yourself 184 years in the future. A cure. You will wake to discover that the AIDS virus that killed you in the old world has been eradicated. You'll wish then that your rich, also sick friends had listened to you when you laid out your plans for re-life. But they hadn't, not one of them, it turns out. And to make matters worse, you have no pictures of them. So awake and healed now, you will squeeze your eyes shut and try to remember the way your friends looked when they laughed, and who tanned too much, and who bedded Valerie Bertinelli and Jan Michael Vincent. Of course, you all reading this don't even know who these people are. On realizing that everyone around you has no idea who or what you know, you will miss your friends even more. Pigeons. After your first walk on the NA West lily pad with its flashes of monorails and its planned, flawless structure, you will cry about pigeons of all things. They who you once called the rats of the sky are gone in the new world when you thought pigeons would never be gone. Something about not being migratory birds, about not having the genetic makeup of migratory birds would allow them to survive. But something about that something was wrong. And now they are gone, and you cry because you used to feed those fat bastards on the Santa Monica Pier, where you would sit with pages of TV scripts to rifle through. Paper pages, red pens, and pigeon shit. All of that will be gone for you. What else is gone? Punk rock bands demanding to bleed, black cars with checkerboards painted on them, the boys ripping off their shirts on narrow tabletops under strobe lights, yelling lyrics to songs, and the people who would later spoon feed them while they wasted away. The homeless are missing, some staggering, some sleeping, some praying. The ones who eat poetry, the ones who only eat Dairy Queen blizzards, the ones who will eat anything, and the ones who eat nothing at all. Dog shows, the Kentucky Derby, the Cold War lollipops, the man who sold fresh mangoes downtown, and the Oscars, all gone. The coast is here, but different. But if you, like me, used to live on the coast, you will feel relief upon waking up and finding that at least the coast is still here. On NA West, off the western side of the US, more than half the coastline feels like Southern California, with warm, pale sands that dampen the ocean, that are dampened by the ocean, and the occasional dock slipping right out into the water. One even has an arcade. Everything else might have changed, but the beaches are here. You will monorail out to the edges of the beaches, sit on the sand in the cold breeze, and let the warm sun warm your face, and you will think, because of this beach, everything will be fine. And one day it will, but not because of the beach. I've learned that all of you are fascinated by stories of my horribly boring air travel back in the old world. You just love hearing stories about airplanes and how the world looks from so high above. As someone from the Nordic lily pad said, something that used more energy on a single flight than every boat on our lily pads use in a year. We were a frivolous lot back then, true, but that was simply how we lived, with our giant cans of hairspray and our acres of grazing cattle, our basements filled with those water-guzzling marijuana plants, and our airplanes, which I would sometimes take to attend a party in San Francisco for one night, because it was San Francisco and it was the 1980s. You would have done the same. I recently discovered a way to get back to my dear San Francisco, VRQ. I simply paid a design programmer, a dream weaver as they're called, and voila, my old friends and I are back together again in a virtual world. We go dancing at discos at the top of impossibly tall buildings, drinking red drinks and passing around what we used to call the vapors. A man I once knew, a perpetual expat, told me that he moved from country to country in order to never fit in, to never settle down, to never have a home. Last month, I told my old friends in our virtual space that I am from the future, and they said, that must be wild. But now I wonder if I should tell them that I was joking. just joking about this future business. Otherwise, I might start feeling like an expat there too. And then where would I be? I'm spending 8 hours a day in my VRQ chair, and they say it's too much. I see it over there now, ready to take me home again, and I feel badly as if I'm wasting this second chance at life, and yet I relent, and I know I will plug back in. In the year I was cryo-frozen, 1988, old world America shot down an Iranian passenger plane by accident, killing 300 passengers. In my era, in the circles I danced with, we believed that was an accident. Now I know it was not. Nothing really was. You know this and so much more, my informed readers, but I did not. I woke up to find that not only was my world gone, but the one I had lived in had not been honest, and in that way had not been real. Learn from me. Learn not to trust what you hear, especially in these places called utopias. It is, after all, our ability to keep secrets and not our language that separates us from other species. In that spirit, I will now be free from my secrets. Secret number 1. I not only slept with Robbie, but also his brother Bobby. Robbie and Bobby were not twins, as their name may suggest, although they were similar in the most unusual ways. Secret 2. I stole money from every retail job I've ever had, including cashmere sweaters that I listed as stolen and a pair of pants I never even wore. 3. I push my lovers away because I'm afraid they will leave. Then I make them leave by being critical and distant so I can feel justified believing that they would leave. I know, it's fucked up. 4. The third episode I wrote for the Facts of Life came from an idea I stole from a friend, a good friend. 5. Deep down, I believe I deserved to get AIDS, and now that it has been eradicated, I worry that something else will take its place. I'm the same person after all, even if the disease is not. 6, I miss smoking. 7, if you are reading this last one is no longer a secret. Today at noon, I will be wired and hooked into various machines that will pump my body with fluids and collect the ones that leak out. I'm going away without ever leaving my VRQ chair. I will be rolled back and forth by that chair to prevent the settling of my blood and to exercise my body to stop atrophy. And another machine will clean my teeth, cut my hair, trim my nails. My vitals will be monitored until they stop. I'm going home. My chair will sit in a warehouse with other chairs, not unlike the tank I was frozen in for all those years. Only this time I will live my dreams, and perhaps one lucky day, I will forget that that is what they are. Okay, well, thanks so much to Saints and Sinners for hosting this virtual festival. And I plan to see you all face to face next year in New Orleans. Bye now.